DIES. So dye painted in landscapes, I actually start with the dye, and the fabric is usually a white or a cream fabric. And I'm actually going to go through 3 different types of dyes in this video so that you have an understanding of the dyes used to paint fabric for art quilts. So these are some of my dyes. I don't have them all on the video, but these are some of the dyes that I do have, and I'm going to go through each one. So I also have 2 fabrics. I have a cotton fabric and I have a kind of nubby raw silk fabric. So the cotton fabric has to use a dye made for cotton, and the silk fabric has to use an acid dye made for silks. So there's differences in the dyes used for each fabric. So first up, we have the RIT dyes, and RIT is like your standard dye that you can find at a craft store, at Walmart, at your local Joann's or Michael's, and it's pretty easy to find, but it's definitely not going to be the best quality for dye painting. But if that's all you are able to find for your dye painting projects, I'm going to show how it works in the next video, and kind of give some tips on how to make that work better for dye painting. So RIT dyes come in a liquid form, pre-mixed liquid, or it comes in a powder form. I prefer to use the powder form. That's what I use for my cotton dyes, and I like being able to control how much I'm mixing up at a time, so I prefer the powder form. RIT is recommended for natural fabrics, so cotton, wool, silk, but you really don't want to try it on polyester because it's just going to come right out. So if you are using RIT dye, and a lot of people use RIT dye for like tie-dyeing t-shirts, if the t-shirt is cotton, it sticks really well. If the t-shirt has like spandex or polyester in it, it just doesn't stick as well. So like I said in the second video, I will show how to use these dyes, including the RIT dye, which is the most readily available. The second dye that I have is a fiber reactive dye, and I get my dyes from Dharma Trading. You can see they do label their dyes. So the fiber reactive dye is the one I use for cotton, and it is also a powder. I definitely don't want to get the powder on my fabric, so it is a powder, and you use that powder to mix up the amount of dye that you want to use. So with these fiber reactive dyes, with the powders, there's some other things that you need to be able to effectively use these. The RIT dye powder, you can just mix it up with water and go. You don't need anything else. But the fiber reactive powder dyes, you do need some other things. There's something called urea, which I don't have any on the demonstration table right here, but urea helps to blend the colors when you're mixing it with water. This is sodium alginate, which is a thickener, which there's 2 different kinds. There's a high viscosity for cotton and a low viscosity for silk and cotton. I got the high viscosity because I only use the fiber reactive dyes for cotton. I use the acid dyes for silk, and also for wool. I haven't done wool in a long time. I mostly just do cotton and silk, but the fiber reactive dyes I just use with cotton. And then you're going to need something called a dye activator. And this is a soda ash. It's a little toxic, so this is the part of dyeing that is like the most potentially irritating. But you do need the soda ash fixer in order to make that color stick. So that's what I use for the cotton. And then for my silk, and I do use 100% silk. I don't use a silk blend or like a faux silk. So right now I just have a raw silk, but in the past I've used like a shiny silk. I prefer the raw silk, which has more of a texture to the shiny silk because I can control it better in my art quilts. But for all of my silk, I use this jacquard silk color, which is an acid dye. It comes liquid, so it's already in the liquid form. And in order to make the die set, you have to use a permanent die set. So that is a fixative that's used to set the die in the silk. And I'll be going through this process in the next videos. I just wanted to share all of the materials that I use for the die painting. For all my die painting, I use just a regular palette and regular paintbrushes. And I like having the control of the paintbrush. I know all of these dies you can use like just a bath, like dunking the whole piece of fabric into one bath. But I really like to control, and that's why I'm going to be sharing my die painting techniques, because I like to be able to control the die as it goes onto my fabric. So again, this is just an introduction to the materials. I will be going through the processes in the next part. So I will be uploading that one shortly. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching Soliloquies, and stay tuned for the next part of die painting landscapes.